Hello everyone and welcome to the NDTV WEF debate right here in Davos. This is one of the features here at Davos. We try and take a look at whatever issues there are that are really concerning India in particular and India's place in the world. And our theme today is going to be India's turn to transform. And transform specifically in this case, we're going to be focusing not just on growth and growth rates, although those will come up, but specifically the current steps that are being taken against black money, against corruption, and specifically demonetization, that banning of high-value currency notes that took place 3-4 months ago has had a major impact. And the jury is out. Was it good? Was it bad? Was it a wonderful idea but not implemented correctly? Was it as good as it could have been? Was it not necessarily the greatest of idea? So on this particular panel, we're going to take a look, A, at what India has just done and its implications. And because we're here at Davos, we're going to be getting a lot of global advice and expertise and some of the top experts in the field giving us suggestions on what could have been done better and what can still be done to ease any residual pain there is. And then we want to move on to something else, which is perhaps an even more important question. The stock of black money is all very well, but what happens to the flow? How do we prevent corruption in the future? How do we prevent the further generation of black money from coming in? Let me start now by welcoming the panel that we have. Nirmala Sitharaman, Minister of State for Commerce and Industry of India. Thank you so much for being with us. Somebody who's been dealing with the entire aftermath of what's happened with cash. We have Kenneth Rogoff here, who's famously written a book called The Curse of Cash. So I guess the Indian government could always say all they were doing was taking your advice, although I know you have said they didn't exactly follow your playbook, and we'll get you to tell us why. So, okay. So it's not all your fault, is what I think you're trying to say, Kenneth. Right. Arundhati Bhattacharya, the chairman of the State Bank of India, India's largest bank, and again has had to deal with all those long queues, which are now starting to diminish a little bit. But we'll get your sense and your perspective of it. It's a great pleasure to have with us Federico Sturzenegger, who's the governor of the Central Bank of Argentina and a young global leader. Somebody who's also thinking about something very similar in Argentina. And we want to get your sense of what lessons you may or may not have learned from India. And if you're doing it, would you be doing it slightly differently? And Carmen Reinhart is a professor of the International Financial System at the Harvard Kennedy School. Written a book also, or a couple of books, I think, with Ken Rogoff. So maybe if I could get a minute each from all of you, and then we'll go into a freewheeling discussion on this. Nirmala, why don't I start off with you? Here at Davos, everyone would be asking this question. Look, here you had India chugging along really nicely, the fastest growing economy in the world, and suddenly you decide to take a step, and as for the IMF, again, we're no longer the fastest growing economy, we're now just stepped behind China. It will recover, no doubt, within a week or a month. But why did the government feel it was necessary to do this?
Well, it was part of our electoral promise. And even soon after coming into power in May 2014, we started doing a lot of things which were till then not even touched in spite of a Supreme Court order. And if steps were to be followed, we followed it up with many other steps which were necessary, like coming up with an income disclosure scheme which ended as of the September 30th, 2016, whereby people were asked to declare non-tax paid assets which were otherwise kept away from the system. Besides that, we've also been negotiating with countries where Indians have kept accounts abroad, where non-tax paid money or assets had been created. We wanted the information to be shared. Agreements have been signed. Double taxation avoidance treaty, which was becoming a big issue because a lot of investments were happening in India. I do not know if that expression is common outside. We call it as round-tripping of cash. Indian money going outside and coming back as fresh investment back into India, neither paying tax in India nor paying tax in the host country from where they were coming. So these were issues, one after the other, the government has done in the last 2.5 years. Other than, of course, bringing such laws which would very clearly not entertain holding of assets which are not publicly tax paid and declared. Now, this step of demonetization was absolutely necessary because we are talking of an emerging economy. We are talking of a country which could send, Mangalyaan to the Mars. We were doing a fantastic lot of research, but yet 87% of our economy was in the informal, only cash-driven segment. And when I say only cash-driven segment, these transactions were not even getting captured anywhere. The money wouldn't go to banks, the money wouldn't come out of banks, the transactions were not getting recorded anywhere, and as a result of which, the number of people who were paying tax as per the existing budgetary announcements was very, very small. In fact, this is a famous statistics which we keep quoting nowadays. Only about 50 lakh people say that they earn over 10 lakh of rupees annually and therefore are subject to some kind of a tax. All others who file their returns but pay no tax. Can a country which is aspiring to grow manifold in research, in innovation, in bringing newer technologies on the one hand, and on the other, which has a bulk of population which still needs a lot of entitlements to be provided to them, can we survive if this is the kind of tax to GDP ratio continues? And the two denominations of currencies which were made no longer legal tender, the 500 and 1,000, in value terms, constituted 87% of the entire currency floating in the country. We had to do it, we owed it to the country, and we don't regret it.
You owed it to the country and you don't regret it?
Absolutely not. It was required and we took a bold step. And it is, even if it sounds a bit propagandist, I'll say this. You need a leadership which has the courage and the vision to do it, and also the stamina to stick with it, to say that it is for the good of the country, maybe long term, short term, yes, you may have pain. We are willing to redress the pain as soon as possible. But I'm sorry, we have to do it.
What was your sense, though, of overall what happened in India and why you think it deviated from your playbook?
I want to underscore some things the minister said, that the Modi government's had a broad array of measures at trying to deal with the black economy, trying to deal with tax evasion. My book's about advanced countries. It doesn't, it sort of says, I don't see doing this yet in developing economies, but it actually talks about some of the policies India did that were very clever. For example, requiring, in many cases, licenses to be paid online instead of in cash, which, the whole idea of the license, Raj, and everything, it was a brilliant, very simple, brilliant idea, and there were many things. On the demonetization, I think certainly the idea behind it was good. What they were trying to do of address black money, terrorism, crime is hard to argue with. I would say some of the tactics, if I had been asked, I might have said to do differently. First of all, there are people who recommended doing it overnight. I point to someone in the 70s, but I say 5 to 7 years is better, like the Euro system did, in order to avoid collateral damage. A second point is, one could question, and I just didn't look at the evidence. I have India treated in my book, but of course the largest bill was about $15. And, is that worth doing? And if you're doing that one, should you also have done the 500 ruble note? I mean, I don't know. I haven't been presented with everything, but it's smaller than my threshold. Probably the single biggest thing is this question of how much do you want to capture the black money, stand there ready to arrest them if they can't, say what they did with it, versus avoid collateral damage in the economy. And I think a big problem is that almost nobody knows this, but it actually takes time to print currency. You think, I'd just run it through a Xerox machine. Actually, these machines are like rocket science. It's very complicated. 6 to 12 months, also in Europe, everywhere. And so you need the new currency printed before you replace the old currency. And I think that was the single biggest problem that they had. But, I do think it's going to take years to see what the long-run effect will be.
It was theoretically possible to have printed 500 rupee notes weeks, months in advance, had a stock of 600 6 lakh crores of new notes printed in a warehouse somewhere. Say it's a new design that we are coming up with. Print the series, and then after demonetization, you could remonetize really fast. Why is it that the government never did that?
No, I appreciate this observation, and all things being equal, yes, we could have done that. But then, the same argument holds good here too. Indians are very sharp in these sort of things. They would have smelt it, saying, oh my God, it's being printed. It's being printed. You don't do it for fancy. There's something coming. Much before you would have imagined, people would have stashed.
Well,
So I think on all scores, we have to keep factoring the brilliant Indian mind.
Well, theoretically, just to play devil's advocate in this, theoretically, you could have run a children's design competition and say, new 500 rupee note to be designed, and say it's going to be a pink note with the Mangalyaan on the back. So when you're printing it, people would have said, yeah, we know they're printing it. They wouldn't necessarily have anticipated demonetization.
I'm not printing.
No matter how smart they are.
Vikram, I'm not going to be holding a philatelic competition for children. I'm printing rupees. I'm printing.
No, I'm just saying how you could have got
money.
over the secrecy question. Well, that's one way of getting over the secrecy question. That's the only limited point. Okay, Arundhati, the basic philosophy of what was done, and having had a rather harrowing 3 months in retrospect, are there things that you think, A, the government could have done differently, the Reserve Bank of India could have done differently, or banks like yours could have done differently?
Well, starting with banks like ours, I don't really think we could have done anything differently. I think we put our best foot forward and really fought it out from the trenches almost, so to speak. Regarding the Reserve Bank, I think what has been said earlier and in many other forums, that probably more communication would have been good. Because as you know, when there is a situation that people don't understand, there's a lot of angst, there is anxiety, there is fear, and it's important to have official communication in order to sort of assuage people's fears and to ensure that things don't go out of control. In fact, I personally have done a lot of communication mainly in order to give that sense of comfort to people that things will work out and it's a matter of time only. Regarding the government, I think the only thing that probably they should have done is to have more stock of new notes printed before this whole thing came in. The minister has already said why that was not possible. So that's for anybody to accept or not accept. But probably that is one area where, things could have been better. But having said that, if I can just add that what was amazing was this 1.3 billion people strong country. 86% of the cash that you had suddenly goes out of the system. And you have these huge crowds in every single bank outlet. But in spite of all of that, not one riot, not one loss of life through rioting or law and order situations. There could have been some people who fainted in the lines or even lost their lives on account of very many other things, but that could have happened in any situation. But the fact that nobody in the country actually took law and order in their hands in the face of such a huge situation. And also, this was the first time, being a very large bank, I am used to receiving at least a dozen complaints of misbehavior every day. This was one period when I didn't receive a single complaint of misbehavior throughout this entire period. So, there was a lot of, what should I say, a popular feeling of support for the step that has been taken. And obviously, people who were serving them, that is our employees as well, they were sort of, it became a kind of doing a kind of national duty almost. So it was a very different feeling, and I do not really know how that came about. But probably there is a feeling that not enough is being done in order to ensure that the gains of prosperity is being given to all. And this was seen as one of those steps that would be required for that kind of a thing.
So psychologically, people put up with hardship because they thought this was a decisive blow against the fat cats and the others who were... So in a sense, it was almost like standing in the line and signaling that same protest that we've been talking about so much here in Davos, that this is the way that the people with ill-gotten gains are going to get it in the neck.
And I think it's very important. One of these surveys in India said that 58% of India's wealth is concentrated in 1% of its people. So you can imagine the division between the haves and the have-nots. And that, when it keeps getting wider, it's going to result in a lot of pushback. And these sort of steps probably answer those people to the extent that, yes, something is being done in order to ensure that the gap doesn't widen further.
You would probably have the clearest finger on the pulse of the situation on the ground. Would you say things are 90% back to normal, 80% back to normal? What sort of cues are you hearing about? What sort of stress levels are your bank officials under now?
Cues are now a thing of the past in metro, urban, semi-urban areas. They're still there in rural areas, mainly because in the rural areas there are many more people to be served and less people to serve them, because our branches in the rural areas are typically small branches manned with very few people. Turnover-wise, I would say people are up to 92, 93% of where they were before the demonetization. So about 92% is where I would put it. What the problem really is that in many small businesses that were avoiding taxes, they were doing legal business, but they were not really paying taxes because they were not reporting their revenues. For them, they feel that some of their business models may have become unviable because their margins were so thin that they feel that once they become included in the regular system, in the official system, then their margins will not give them the ability to carry that on. Now, these businesses are literally reimagining their business case and the business model. Yeah. So I think this is one area where we will have some time lag before they come back in. You know, one other thing that is not generally known is that the cash intensity in the Indian economy has been going up tremendously. If you look at a bank like ours, we were giving cash to the extent of 3.4 billion rupees per day in 2013-14. In early months of this year, that had gone up to 6.9 billion per day. So from 3.4 to 6.9 in a matter of 3 years. And if you look at cash with public, in the last 2 years, cash with public had gone up enormously. Not only that, in 2006, the higher denomination notes comprised only 46%. From 2006 to 2016, in 10 years' time, it had come from 46 to 86%.
Could also be partly the effect of inflation.
The cash economy had become immense, absolutely.
Nirmala, before I come to Federica, I think you would also, probably, the Prime Minister said it in his last speech, applaud the resilience of the Indian people, that they actually, this entire period, 2-month, 3-month period of what must have been an intense amount of hardship for many people, done in surprisingly good grace. Not just that there were no riots. There was, you talk to people in the queues, they said, well, all right, we are there, there's hardship, but it's probably all for the best for the future. So I guess you would be joining the Prime Minister and applauding the people.
Absolutely. No part of the country, because all of us, ministers, MPs, were moving around to different parts of the country to understand and take the feedback. And that was one of the reasons why the DEA, the Department of Economic Affairs, almost on a daily basis had to come and respond to some of the messages that we were sending from different parts of the country, saying, would you do this, please? Would you redress this little bit of difficulty, and so on. So through the 50 days, you had the DEA coming out and speaking every day to respond to those calls which we heard on the ground. But even as we were sending these messages, I'm absolutely shocked, and I pay my respects to all the Indian citizens who put up with this hardship with such a grace. You were right, absolutely graceful conduct. There wasn't any bitterness. If anything, I can say that we drew a lot of motivation from it by a common citizen telling you, we understand why you're doing this.